And we're going to actually start our warm up with our weights. So we want to loosen up the shoulders. We're going to do a lot for the shoulders today. So we're using the weights to gently pull our shoulders down away from the ears. So we're just allowing the weight to drop down. Take a few deep breaths, allowing your shoulders just to drop. Sometimes when we get caught up working on computers or stressed out, we raise our shoulders. So we're just letting our arms hang gently down to our side. And now we're going to bring our right ear to the right shoulder. Drop the chin down to the chest. Left ear to left shoulder. And going back and forth. Don't go outside of your range of motion if it feels tight. Don't push it. We're just looking for a light opening in the neck. And now we're going to make some shoulder rolls while holding the weights at our side. So it really helps to depress the shoulders, getting them away from the ears. We spend a lot of time lifting the shoulders up towards the ears without even realizing it. So this is a great exercise to do just to loosen up so that you don't have tight muscles, which can sometimes lead to headaches. Let's change directions. So we're going up as high as we can, forward as far as we can, down as low as we can, and just alternating sides. Go ahead and take a few deep breaths. Now we're going to take a wide stance, bring our weights to the center. We're bending our knees slightly, lifting the tailbone up, and just let your arms hang down. Keep holding the weights. Your hands might swing a little bit, and that's okay. Not only are you stretching through your hamstrings, but you're allowing your shoulder blades to open. So did you ever get one of those pains in between your shoulder blade and your spine, and it just felt unbearable? It really hurts, and pressure points can usually help. This exercise right here, just letting your arms hang down, letting your shoulders open up away from the spine, is a great one to keep those muscles loose. So anytime if you're prone to getting those types of injuries, or you just want to avoid it, this is a great thing to do every day. And from here, bring your hands up to your thighs, back roll up one vertebrae at a time, roll the shoulders back. And now we're going to lift our chin up to the ceiling. This is our last real stretch for the neck. We spend a lot of time pushing our chin forward, pushing our head forward, getting rid of that natural curvature in the spine. So now we're just lifting the chin up, looking up, breathing, noticing how your breath is a little bit different as you inhale and exhale with your chin lifted. This is such a great exercise to do as well. And if you want to add on to it and get a little bit more benefit for your upper spine, pull the shoulders back, engage the upper back. And then gently look up. And we're going to get started with some light shoulder exercises. So we're going to start with the weight together, elbows out. And we're going to stir the pot. So we're going clockwise. And then as soon as you get to the center, you're going to go counterclockwise. So we're just changing directions, but I want you to pay attention to your weights. Make sure they're in alignment. Your wrists are in alignment with your shoulders. You're reaching as far to the right, as far forward, and as far to the left as you can, but we're not turning our hips. So we have the natural tendency to want to move our hips with the weights, and we want to keep our hips really still. We're turning the tailbone under, keeping the lower abdominals engaged as we go through this motion, and you might even feel your core working as you go through these stirring motions. But it's also a lot for the shoulders, and since we're moving through it, it's nice and dynamic, very functional, keeps the whole shoulder strong. If this gets to be too tough, you can always drop down to one weight and do the same thing. We're going at this for a little while. And this is a good place to pay attention, check in with your shoulders, see how it feels. Does it feel the same on both sides when you're going in both directions? Do you feel a little bit like you want to turn your hips on one side more than the other? And go ahead and give yourself a couple of shoulder rolls, roll it out. And we're going to do some forearm bicep curls. So we're bringing our arms out to the side, almost like we're the letter A, if we bring it up to the top of our head and draw a line down to the other side. And then we're curling up. So my fingers are pointing to the front of the room. And now I'm making the letter W with my arms. So letter A, letter W, alternating sides. This is a little different than a regular bicep curl. You're working your forearms. You're working the insides of your biceps a little bit more. You might be working in the front of your shoulders a little bit more. So people are going to feel this in different places. And that's okay. Usually in the system, you feel it in the weakest link. So if your shoulders are tiring out first, Maybe your shoulders and the front need to have a little bit of strength. Maybe if your forearms are feeling it, doing forearm exercises are important. So keep going through this. Keep our upper back engaged. We're squeezing our shoulder blades together. And don't forget to keep the elbows wide. So we're going letter W, letter A, back and forth. See where you notice the muscle fatigue happening first. And we're always working to volitional fatigue. And volitional fatigue just means you can't do any more with good form because your muscles are tired. Because we don't want to just go through the motions and go through a couple rounds not really feeling like we're working that hard and then go on to the next thing, because that's not how we build strength. If you want to build strength, you have to work the muscle past its fatigue point. The second you start to lose form though, that's it. Go ahead and take a break. Give yourself a couple shoulder rolls here just to relax through the shoulder. Now we're going to bring the weights together. We're going to lift our arms up over our head, elbows come together, elbows are over the shoulders, dipping the weight down so that it's right at the top of our collarbones, yeah, right, right on top of our scapula, our shoulder blades. When we're in this position though, glance over, can you see your forearms? Make sure they're parallel lines, make sure they're close to your ears, and then raise your forearms up to the ceiling, keeping the elbows right over the shoulder. Upper arms hugging the ears, close to the body, dropping down, raising up. This is a great exercise for triceps because we really have to resist gravity, and with our elbows over our shoulders, we're also working our shoulder flexibility. So if you have a hard time with shoulder flexibility, if you feel a little stiff in that exercise we did where we bring one hand up and the other hand tries to reach around your back, see if you can touch your fingers. If you have a hard time with that exercise, then this is a great exercise to do to strengthen through the tricep, but also to increase mobility in the shoulder itself. Let's do one more repetition. Bring the arms down, shake it out. And we're going to avoid overhead presses today, but what we will do is we're going to bring the weights together. Now the backs of my hands are facing forward. Weights are together. I realize they're the same color as my pants, so you can't tell, but they're here. And then I'm going to lift up, keeping the weights touching. I'm bringing the weight up to my collarbone. Elbows are higher than my shoulders. And then I'm bringing it down nice and slow. Again, we're going to volitional fatigue. So you're going to know that you're losing your form if maybe one arm is raising up more than the other arm is just petering out, or you have that, you get to a certain point where you lean back. If you start to lean back, that means your form is gone. So we want to take a wide stance with our feet, gives us a little more balance. Make sure we're keeping our hips engaged, keeping our lower core engaged to keep us from doing that backwards lean. So we don't want to put strain on our back when we're lifting. And when we do that, we're splitting the load up, allowing our back and our hips to do some of the lifting. When this is really for our upper shoulders, upper traps, a little bit of forearms. So we want to make sure that we're giving them the full benefit because those are smaller muscles and we need to make sure that we're keeping them strong. So nice and slow, we're resisting gravity on the way up, resisting momentum on the way up, resisting gravity on the way down. Take note of how does this feel in your shoulders? Do you feel it differently on one side than the other? Do you feel stronger on one side than the other? Or maybe there's a little bit of shoulder pain happening. So pay attention to those things so that you're aware. The nice thing about dumbbells is that each arm has to pull its own weight. So you know that you're not doing more on one side than the other. But then it's important to make sure that you're lifting your elbows to the same height on both sides. Go ahead and roll it out. And at any time that we're doing these, if you feel like you need to take a break, go ahead and take a break. I'd rather see you stop and take a few breaths and then get right back into it than start to use bad form. Next exercise we're doing is a reverse fly. So reverse fly, we're going to bend our knees, bring our back flat to the parallel to the floor or slightly angled up from the floor. The weights are coming down to the thickest part of your chest. So if you were to bring the weights up to your chest, straight down, that's where we are. We're going to open the arms nice and wide, squeezing the shoulder blades at the top, looking forward the whole time. So from the side, my back is flat. I'm lifting through my tailbone, so I'm not rounding out at my lower back. And I'm lifting laterally to the side so that my pinkies are leading the way. And making sure at the top of the motion that I'm squeezing my shoulder blades. Again, if we're going to volitional fatigue, so if you get tired, go ahead and stop, or you can go single side, right side, left side, back and forth. But you're going to know that you start to lose form if you pull one of these sorts of things where you bend the elbows and kind of stand up with it. So we want to make sure that we're keeping our lower back stable, keeping our core stable, keeping our chin up, squeezing between the shoulder blades. This one's so good for posture. And then if it gets to be too tiring, another option is bending your elbows and leading with the elbows. So we're just getting rid of some of that leverage, squeezing the shoulder blades in that way. And we're still getting this posterior deltoid, back of the shoulder. Go ahead and bring it up, roll it out. So that was a reverse fly because we were facing the floor. Now we're going to face the ceiling and do a chest fly. So we're going to drop down to the floor, laying on our backs, knees bent. We've done these before. Weights over the chest, open and close. If this is too much, if your weight's too much, bend the elbows and lead with the elbows, just like we did with the chest fly or the reverse fly. So this is working your chest. You can go bent elbow or almost to a straight arm, but whatever angle that you pick, you want to keep that angle and you want to make sure that you're always in alignment with your chest. So this is a transverse motion. So we're always staying in alignment with our chest. If you think about a cross section of your chest, we're staying within that cross section. Do a couple more of these, and then we're going to jazz it up because our chest is pretty strong. Our weights are pretty light. So we're going to make it a little bit more core intensive by picking our legs up so that our shins are parallel to the floor. Our back is supported. And now we're going to go right side and then left side. Now it might not feel like much. You might not feel a lot happening in your core, but you might start to feel that your legs want to sway away from the weight that you're moving. And your core is working to keep your body in place. If you really want an adventure, try this on a bench. You're really going to feel like you're going to fall on the floor when you do this exercise from a bench. From the floor, you're a little bit more stabilized. But we still want to keep our legs still, keep our shins parallel to the floor, and we're working our hip flexors just a little bit at the same time. If you get tired, take a break, and then get right back into it. This is all about endurance. And sometimes if our weight's too light, you might not get to that point of volitional fatigue, and that's okay. Go ahead and relax the legs, bring the weight down, give your shoulders a little bit of a break, and now we're going to go right into ceiling reach. So we're bringing the weights right over the chest, holding them together. Pick a point on your ceiling that your weight is covering. So right about in alignment with where your eyes are or slightly lower, maybe the point on the ceiling right above your neck. Now bring the weights into that focal point. And then we're just lifting the shoulder blades up, looking at that point on the ceiling, and then dropping it back down. So I'm not reaching forward with my weights. If you notice, the weights are staying right over my shoulders as I raise up. So it's putting a little more weight on the upper part of my body, so that when I bring my shoulder blades up off of the floor, my core has to work just a little bit harder because the weight is situated at the top, towards the top of my body, which is increasing the leverage or weight at the end, which means my rectus abdominis muscle has to work a little bit harder. If you want to test that theory, try reaching forward and notice how much easier it is when you reach forward. So make sure that you feel challenged. When you need a break, take a break. Exhaling as you lift, inhaling back down. Use your exhale to help propel you forward. Keeping the wrists over the shoulders the whole time. Keep the chin lifted. If this ever feels difficult for the front of your neck, try pressing your tongue to the roof of your mouth, and you might find some of that pressure on the front of the neck relief. And bring it down. Let's bring it up to a standing position. And we got a lot for the upper body. A little bit for the core, so now it's time for legs. We're going to start out with a straight leg deadlift. So we have light weights today, and if you're new to deadlifts or your lower back feels a little bit iffy, drop it down to one weight and just hold one weight in your hands. So we're going to take a pretty wide stance. My toes are out slightly. I'm bringing the weights together. I'm bending my knees. I'm lifting through my tailbone to have a neutral back. I'm bringing the weights all the way down as far as my hamstrings will allow. You might not be able to reach the floor, and that's okay. The important thing is when we're at this point, we don't want to round out the lower back, and we don't want to overarch the lower back. Then from here, I'm pushing through my heels, pulling the weight up to my hips, and bringing it back down. So from the side, I'm not rounding out too much. I'm just trying to keep a flat back, keeping my chest forward, looking forward. My hamstring flexibility isn't that great today, so I can't reach the floor. But if you notice, at this point, my back wants to roll. I want to roll out, so I'm trying not to do that. So I'm stopping before I want to roll out my upper back, and then I'm just gradually pulling it up, keeping a neutral back, bringing my hips forward back in place. So I want you to go through this motion slowly. You're going to notice muscles in your hamstrings working. That's the back of your thigh. You might feel the muscles in your lower back working, but you never want to feel pain. So we're not trying to strain the lower back, and that's why it's so important that you keep a slight bend in the knees as you go through the motion. And at this point, if you want to bring the weights a little farther away from each other so that each wrist is under the shoulder, that's all right. Just slowly go through this motion. Take note of where you're feeling it. Do you feel it more on one side of the body than the other? If you do, you might be leaning to one side, or you might have a strength imbalance. Just make sure we're keeping that back flat, looking forward. When we look forward, it helps us to keep our upper back a little bit more engaged. And we're breathing through it. This is a great one to help increase flexibility in the hamstring too. So by the third, fourth, fifth rep, you might be able to reach down a little bit farther than you did before. Make sure though that you're putting even weight in both feet. Now, if we were to do this with a barbell, we would probably take an alternating grip. So one palm would face forward, the other palm would face back. You might see people at the gym doing that, but with dumbbells, we don't really have to. Let's do one more. And then step it out. Now we're just going to do some suitcase squats. So we're holding our weights just like we would hold a suitcase, bending the knees, sinking the hips back, put the suitcases down. Oops, you didn't need to put them down, put them back or bring them back up. So you never let go of the suitcase. Set it down on the floor, bring it back up. From the side, my hips are going backwards. I'm keeping my chest up. And I'm bringing, for these ones, I'm just bringing my knees to about 90 degrees. If this ever gets to be difficult or you're not quite sure if you're in the right form, if you feel pain in the knees, use a chair or a bench and actually sit down. Look at your knees, where they are in relationship to your toes. Look at where your hips are, and then stand it back up. So you can practice with the chair, tap the chair or actually sit down and bring it back up. And holding the weights at our sides keeps our shoulders away from the ears, helps us to keep our chest up, but it also adds to our body weight. So our legs are working just a little bit more than sitting and standing without holding anything. Do a couple more of these, and then we're going to drop down to one weight. All right, these are a favorite of mine. They're a little bit difficult, so if you want to be close to a wall, close to something that you can hold on to, by all means, make sure that you feel safe. We're going to stand on one foot, extending one leg behind us. My balancing knee is slightly bent, and then I'm going to dip down, keeping that bend in the knee, hinging forward, and bring it right back up. And then I'm going to switch sides and do it on the other leg. So I'm keeping my chest up. This is a single leg deadlift, alternating hands, and then bring it back up. The reason that we're alternating sides is because sometimes whenever you do it all on one side, by the third or fourth rep, you kind of get into the swing of it and you feel a little bit more balanced. But by switching legs, we never really get into the swing of it. So we're constantly working to balance. So when we balance and you feel your yourself wobbling side to side, just like I did. What's happening there are my smaller stabilizer muscles in and around the knee, around the ankle, around my hip, even up in my ribs. Those muscles are jumping in to keep me from falling on the ground. So those muscles have to fire, and the more we force them to fire, the more balanced we are when we are out in the real world. And if we slip, we don't really have to think about ice right now. If you're living in Texas, you probably don't ever have to think about ice again. But, you know, thinking about any of the situations where you feel like you're about to fall and you catch yourself, that catching yourself, those are your core muscles working. So we want to make sure that we keep them strong, keep them active, so that if we are about to slip, or maybe we're trying to paddleboard for the first time, all of those muscles know what to do to keep you balanced. Plus, we're working our hamstrings. Let's keep going. You might feel your lower back start to kick in. You never want to feel pain though. So if you feel out of balance, if you start to feel pain, go ahead and take a break. And relax. Step it out. And sticking with that theme of balance, we're going to do a single leg squat. But we've done these before. I'm going to use this bench just so I can be sure that I'm going to the same depth for the first couple. But we want to hold the weight at our collarbone level, not pressed up against our sides, but holding it at collarbone level. Then from here, you have the option to extend the foot. You can have a light toe on the floor, but keep it light. Or you can cross your ankle over your thigh. We're actually bringing it down to a seated position and standing up. If you don't have a chair with you, that's absolutely fine. The only difference is that you have to make sure that you are dipping down to the same depth for each leg. So if you want to practice a couple on a chair, go for it. If you don't have a chair handy, don't worry about it. But again, we're alternating sides. We don't want to get into the swing of this motion. We want to constantly be challenging our balance. So alternating legs, dipping down as low as you can, and we're not leaning forward to get that depth. So one of the ways that we like to cheat ourselves is when we're doing squats, is by, instead of bending the knee, I start to just lean forward and stand up. But if you notice, that knee is not really doing anything. I'm trying to work my quads. So make sure that you're actually bending the knee, actually sinking the hips down before you bring it up. It doesn't count if you're just leaning forward. So be honest with yourself. Look at that bend in the knee. Make sure you're dropping the hip low. Nice and steady, nice and controlled. Breathing through it, alternating sides. It's okay if you need to stop, take a few steps just to regain your balance. So we want to get right back into it. All right, go ahead and take a break. Not really, but we can stop doing that. We're going to drop it down to the floor, and I'm going to take you through the different levels of this next exercise. So we want to get our obliques, we want to get our lower back, we want to get our core, but crunches only work that top core muscle. It's called the rectus abdominis, and that's just a superficial muscle. It doesn't really do a whole lot for us other than make us look really awesome in a swimsuit. I'm looking for core strength though. So, I mean, it's always nice to look good in a swimsuit too, but when we want to be functionally strong, we want to work the whole core, not just the parts that we can see. So we're going to start out with our heels on the ground, knees slightly bent, lifting up through the chest. I'm going to tap the floor on the right, tap the floor on the left, but notice my elbows are wide and I'm turning my shoulders to rotate. So I'm not just reaching my arms over, but keeping my chest forward. That's not really doing much for you. So you want to make sure that you're slow and controlled. Turn your shoulders, turn your chin to reach the floor. Now, if that doesn't feel too bad, you can try leaning back a little bit more, increasing that angle. If that doesn't feel too bad and you can still rotate your shoulders, Try going back more or raising the heels off of the floor. Now you're holding your heels up off of the floor. You might need to sit up just a little bit more. So wherever you are, keep going for it, but listen to my cues on your lower back. So if your legs are up in the air and you're leaning back, make sure that you're not rounding out the lower back. And you'll know that you're rounding out the lower back if your belly feels concave a little bit. So make sure you're rolling forward on your tail, on your sits bones, that you're not at the top of the sits bones. You want to be right in the center of the sits bones. So if you need to do a quick test to know if your lower back is where it is, drop the weights, put your hands on your shins, and then roll out the lower back just to see what it feels like. And then pull your hips forward to straighten your lower back and lift the tailbone slightly. This is where you want your lower back to be when your legs are up in the air and you're balancing yourself. So if it's really hard to keep your lower back in that space, then put your feet on the floor or sit up a little bit higher. We want to make sure that our lower back is as safe as possible, because these types of twisting motions are precisely the motions that can injure your discs in between the vertebrae. And we don't want to get injured. We want to get fit. All right, go ahead and take a break. We're going to flip it over onto our hands and knees. Last exercise of the day. If we have 2 weights, just going to do 8 on each side. Let's do 10. So what we're going to do, we're going to hook one weight behind our leg. We're going to squeeze that leg, squeeze our hamstring to hold the weight in place. So right now I have the weight in my left leg and my right hand is holding the other weight. Now we're going to raise both and bring it back down. So a little bit of an add-on from what we've been working on in weeks past. Let's do 8 on each side. Ready? 8, 7. This works those core balance muscles too. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Now it's time to switch. So the left hand's holding the weight, right foot, right ankle, that's not your ankle, right knee, squeezing. Now we're gonna lift both sides. Ready? 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Perfect exercise for the whole core, including your shoulders and hips. From here, let's sit on our knees if we can, sitting our hips back towards our heels to open up through the quads, leaning back slightly to get a little bit more of a quad stretch. If that doesn't feel good to you, you can sit on your side and pull one knee back as well, and then switch sides and get the other knee. From here, backs of my hands touching my back towards the sides and bring my elbows forward and down. If you don't feel much of a stretch, means your shoulders are pretty loose, pretty relaxed. But if you want to feel a little bit more, you can bring your hands closer to the side of your body and really work those elbows in towards one another. Again, though, you never want to feel pain. Drop the right ear to the right shoulder. Drop both shoulders down, arms at your sides. Now, if you want to enhance that stretch slightly, bring the right ear a little bit forward towards the front of your shoulder. So I'm tilting my chin, then I'm going to reach my left arm behind my body a little bit more. Dropping that ear down, dropping that shoulder down, reaching down, trying to touch the floor. This stretches the levator scapulae muscle. That's the one I was kind of talking about earlier. Sometimes gets really tense, makes it hard to do things. So it's a good thing to keep it loose. And then bring your neck up to neutral. Left ear to left shoulder. Drop both shoulders down first. Take a few deep breaths here. And we're going to rotate slightly, so I'm pulling my chin towards my right collarbone. My left ear is pointing towards the front of my shoulder a little bit more. And now I'm reaching the right arm back. I'm really trying to increase that distance from the shoulder to the ear. So keep dropping that shoulder. You might feel a whole new section of your neck stretching from this one. It's a really neat stretch. Go ahead and release. We're going to clasp our fingers together, lift our elbows up, look all the way up as we inhale. Exhale, bring the elbows back down. Inhale, raise the elbows, lift the chin as high as you can. Exhale, bring it back down. Keep going. Inhaling and exhaling. Such a great exercise for the neck. We really don't want to lose that curvature in the neck because it can affect everything from headaches to numbness in the fingertips if we start to lose that curvature in the upper spine. Go ahead and take a few shoulder shrugs. Place our hands on the floor, toes under, lift through the hips. You can step it wide, step it narrow, whatever feels good to you. Just trying to open up in through the hamstrings, in through the lower back. Hang your head down, relax your jaw, relax your face. Walk your hands up to your knees, bend the knees slightly. Back roll up one vertebrae at a time. We went through each of these exercises one time. We were really focusing on those core stabilizers today, all of our balance muscles. So if you wanted to go through it again, I'm going to be posting it online so you can go through it twice, but you don't have to.